So it begins. What started all this was, I come to realize all these things I was looking at were starting to make sense. They were starting to paint a picture. A picture can paint 1,000 words. So I kept drawing them down and starting to read the scriptures, and it just kept making more sense to me. The more I continued, the more it made sense. There was no denying it. I couldn't believe it after a while. It is what it is. So I figured, I gotta share this with the world. I gotta tell the world. I want the world to know. I want to talk about these things. But I found that nobody really wants to talk about it. Then I realized, what? I could talk about this on my YouTube channel. I could tell this story on my home page. I don't need to have the publishers. I don't need them. Right? I could do it on here. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell the story. Where do I start? Well, I'm going to start by telling you the story about something that happened to me. So there I was one day sitting watching TV, and my daughter said to me, "Dad, what's that thing there in the corner?" And I said, that's just a logo. It means CNN, for Cable News Network." And there I was, all proud. I just taught my daughter something, CNN logo. And she goes, "Oh, because I thought it said CMI." I'm thinking, CMI? Oh my God. Yes, I see it too. I see CMI inside CNN. I couldn't believe it. I just demonstrated a form of brainwashing. When somebody tells you to see something for what it is and not even think about what it could be, you lost it. You lost all concept of thinking. You just lost, how to learn about it. And then I started thinking it could also be CIW. I started realizing that, to the untrained eye, it could be a lot of things. It could be whatever you want it to be. It could be whatever you interpret it as. But when you have somebody telling you what it is, from a young age, you're going to believe that. But really, it could be a whole bunch of things. So your mind is limited sometimes to the way you're told to think. And this little story I wanted to share with you, because how easy it is for us to have something like this happen to us. So, it helped me think outside the box too, by realizing this year, a lot of things. And I started learning about symbology and how important it really is, symbology. As far back as you can go, before the Holy Bible was written, it was all symbolic. Most languages were written symbolically. The hieroglyphs, the petroglyphs, they're out there. And the way the first written language came down until we came up with the English language. And eventually, it's funny because the language is sort of evolving back to symbology too. And then I realized that, it's not really a primitive language at all. Symbology is a universal language. So keeping that in mind, I just want you to think about that the whole time you're watching this video, is that it's based on symbology, and that's how I'm going to tell the story according to astrology. and the forces of nature. I mean, it goes far back. It goes like this with the sundial, for instance. I mean, this symbol here, when I'm looking at it symbolically, I see the stars, I see the galaxy, I see the universe, I see so many things. I see the zodiacs, the 12 months of the year. You know, I see the seasons. I see how all the seasons change all year round. I also see time. I see daylight, night, 24 hours even, not just 12. I mean, so many things can be said from symbology, just looking at it. When your mind starts to understand this concept, I mean, it gets easier and easier to understand all these things. And it's hard to ignore them after a while because, I mean, let me explain to you, for instance, this map that I made, to tell you everything, and we're going to be here for a while, so anything I miss in this video that you want to read, you need to pause it and check it out. Because if I stop everywhere I'm talking, we're going to be talking for a long time. So, already the video's 2 hours long. So, the Vatican always made me fascinated when they had that telescope, you know. And I always thought they were about religion and just strictly religion. I understand they're supporting science and all that, but I always thought it was interesting that they have a telescope pointing at the man up there, you know. So where do I begin with this story? How do I get into it? Well, I think the easiest way is just to get into it. Start talking about this man and the character that he holds in the Bible. And a lot of things are said about this man, and I'm going to tell you how it's all symbolic. Like, for instance, he was nailed to the cross, and so you have his wounds, and I believe all of these wounds represent a part of the story. And what part of the story is that? Well, we're going to have to talk about this constellation called the Southern Crux. Now the Crux, it's got 5 stars in it. And it's just a coincidence, again, that they make up the 5 wounds of Jesus. You know, the Southern Crux got turned into the Southern Cross, and it's made up of 5 stars. And Jesus got 5 wounds. So each star represents one of those wounds. When the sun goes in front of that constellation, that's what it's talking about, right? Even down to the piercing of his side. I mean, you get a nail to the cross and the piercing. And people often say, oh, he was pierced on his left side, he was pierced on his right side. You know, they show all these images and old drawings of Jesus getting stabbed in the side. Well, you look at the constellation, you see star number 5 lines right up in that spot. I mean, this symbol, could it be so big? Could it mean so much? I say yes. And let me explain. See, that constellation is with us all year round. It's always in the southern hemisphere. And so depending on what side you are of the earth, you might be on the left or the right. I mean, it's funny how it just turns out like that, but we're going to focus on the winter month right now because I want to talk about Jesus and the thieves. The thieves is what really stands out. No one on the internet is talking about this. I'm going to tell you right now. So, what was he talking about when he said, what did Jesus say? What did Jesus mean when he said that? I'll be with you forever in paradise. To me, paradise is the heavens and, you know, space, the universe. And there you have it. up in space. Isn't it forever? Isn't it eternal? And so, out of all the constellations up there, the 88 constellations, I find it crazy how all these constellations are gathered up in this area. I mean, I could literally draw a circle around these constellations and tell this story. I don't understand how it can do this. I mean, you take the crux, Canis Major and Canis Minor, draw the circle in the lines. I mean, what do you got? Well, the crux is very important. You're going to learn more about that. We're going to talk more about that. But this event, this story that they talk about in the Bible, I mean, remember, the thieves are also crucified. They share this event. They share this event with Jesus because, you know, the way the sun rises and sets and everything it does, constellations are pretty much sharing the same thing, right? So you're going to connect the dots on this one. And you got the crux, the Canis Minor and Canis Major. Now, how does that make sense? How does this make sense? How would they, Canis Minor and Canis Major, the two thieves of Jesus that got crucified with Jesus? Most people just laugh when I talk about this stuff. But you haven't let me explain. He said, you'll be with me forever in paradise after this moment. And I believe after this moment, like I said, you're going to have to pause if you want to read this stuff. After this moment, yeah, they're going to experience, you're going to see these constellations in the sky after this event happens. So, it's important to know we're talking about symbology. Because this is why I say the dog constellations are the thieves. Because it's all symbology. It's about symbolism. You know, they added this stuff in the Bible, I guess, because that's just the way the ancients did things, and some words never got changed. Some things stayed the same, and they did change a lot of words in the Bible. You can go look that up. But what I'm getting at is that the dog, traditionally, was known as the thief. If you had a pack of wild dogs, oh, you're in trouble. Just like if you call someone a snake, it means it can't be trusted. You know, they're gonna deceive you in some way. Just like if you call someone a bird, I mean, it means like a mooch. You know, they're gonna bag off you and pick at you. Just like if you call someone a chicken. See, you know, you call someone a chicken, that's a big insult to some people. It's like calling them a coward or something. You know, just like you call someone a rat. You know, that person can't be trusted. They're gonna backstab you somehow. You know, just like you call someone a pig, it means they're like a slob, right? You're a slob. Fat, disgusting slob, stink and all sorts of, you're a pig. It's like you call someone a vulture, you know? They're greedy. They're going to take everything for themselves and not leave you nothing. And that's why I'm going to come back to the dog. Because this is where you get the idea now about Canis Minor and Canis Major. These two constellations are the dog constellations. I mean, we have over time have made these terminologies on ourselves. We did it ourselves. We affiliated the dog with the thief. It's always been like that. And slowly it's been forgotten. But I'm picking this up. Just like, you know, we domesticated these animals and we forgot all the things that they're capable of when they're in the wild. I mean, these guys they see something, they take it. They don't really mean to steal it, but I mean, they just want it. But they stealing it, they're taking it. And, you know, I love animals. I love all the pets, but truth is, the dog is known as the thief, as hard as that is for some of y'all to accept. So there you have it. Canis Minor, little dog, and Canis Major, big dog. It's the two thieves in the heavens forever, in the constellations. And when can you see them? After this event. You see them in the southern hemisphere after this event takes place. You know, the one I mentioned, how you circle the constellations, and it's weird how they're all in the same corner. How could I not notice it? So why couldn't it be at the top or the bottom left or right? Like, why do they all gotta be bunched up in the corner sharing this event? Well, it's hard for me not to notice that maybe it is talking about this event. You know, you draw the lines. You got the two thieves get crucified with the Lord on the crux. There it is, astronomical. Today you will be with me in paradise, forever in heaven. Come on, man, that's space. That's what we're talking about. Between the two thieves. Nobody is talking about this on the internet. No one has come up with this. And why is it so important? It's because of this time of the year. It's the winter solstice. And it's a very important time for us. You know, we are now approaching winter. And there's a funny passage in the Bible. It says, now when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. What are you talking about? I mean, for me, it makes sense to me, but let me try to explain it to you how I see it symbolically. So, if you take the earth and you make it a globe, you can mark out the seasons. I mean, the north side you get more sunshine, the south side you get less sunshine, depending on the season. You know, north side is illuminated, you get more sunlight, and the south is less sunlight, more darkness. You see, you gotta understand that a lot of these things were created from people that lived in the northern hemisphere, and they based a lot of their maps on them shadows and things that they saw based on how they saw it on a sundial in the northern hemisphere. So at the equinox, you get, during the equinox on the north side you get more light, and on the south side it gets more dark. After the equinox, then you experience the solstices. Just like there's two equinoxes, there's two solstices. And I find it interesting, you know, if you draw the clock around the 21st of December, yeah, we get the most hours of darkness out in the northern hemisphere. I mean, it is so dark. The sun barely rises. Some places it don't even rise. So I think it's a really important thing to note that everyone's looking for the eclipse, or they're looking for all these things that happened when Jesus died, but yet it's right in front of your face. It happens every year. The sun rises late, it sets early. I mean, looking around, you got all the beautiful things in the world to look at. And I love the latitude and longitude lines. You notice their numbers. And there was darkness in the land right around this event. We're going to get deeper into the event, because it's funny how that happens. They say when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land. How can it just make sense again? It's a coincidence, you know? Well, let's keep talking about it. You know, the seasons and how they change around this time. I think it's crazy also that a lot of scriptures, a lot of biblical scholars, they say he died at age 33. Well, if you were to write the Earth's axis, put the Earth's axis there, and mark the time when the sun goes in front of the cross on the southern crux around the winter solstice, It was now about the 6th hour, and darkness fell over the whole land until the 9th hour, because the sun was obscured. It's about a time when we experience more hours of darkness, more than 12 hours of darkness, and there was darkness in the land. And in the summer we experience more than 12 hours of daylight. The seasons are always changing. And Libra, I want to bring up Libra for a minute, because what Libra marks is a time when the scales represent balance of the earth for daylight. It's when you have equal light and equal darkness, when you have 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness. So in the north you get more sunshine, in the south you get less sunshine. So let's go back to solstice time, because this is what we're talking about. So the winter solstice, he dies at age 33, and it's crazy because there's two of these events that happen, which we're going to talk about a little later. But it's important to note that at age 33 he dies. And what are they talking about? When you mark it all down on my map, it paints a big picture of what's happening on December 21st, the winter solstice, or the 22nd, whenever you want to call it. But it's very important to note, because this is an important time of the year, and it's all right there. You can look at it through the forces of nature. They say there was darkness in the land when he died at the age 33. Is this an astronomical story? Are they just talking about the changes in the seasons? Is this what the Bible has been about? Let's take a look at it. So when the sun comes to the winter solstice, it rests in front of the southern crux, and the sun stays still for 3 days. Well, it's actually us moving, but it appears that it's just the sun. And it looks like the sun stands still, or they say that he was crucified, or he was nailed to the cross. And this happens for 3 days. We get to the lowest point of the southern hemisphere, we do not move for 3 days. And it appears as if Jesus died for 3 days and was resurrected. Or you can say the sun stops moving south for 3 days and then moves north again. Or some even say born again. But really it's us moving. But the ancients looked at it differently. They thought the sun was walking across the sky, walking on earth. They said he died on the cross, or he was crucified. Doesn't move, you can't move. Another way to say it, nailed to the cross. He even got the spear in the side. The sun stays or stands still. Why does he stay still or stand still? Because they believed the sun was always walking across the earth. So it made more sense to say solstice, which is a Latin word. He died on the cross and was resurrected. He moved north again. He's always with you, forever. Don't be afraid. The cycle is always continuing, and going and going and going. But they mark this time of the year. It's very important to the Latins. They call it solstice because the sol was sun, and stis, that was like the sun standing still. Why? Because they believed again that the sun walked across the earth. And so when it came to the solstice, they said the sun seems to stand still. Stand still, sun stands still. So the sun stands still because they believed he was walking across the earth. Or you could say he was crucified or his hands and feet were nailed to the cross. Just another way of saying it, symbolically. The way the sun travels around the world, and they told a pretty story how to remember it and how to identify it. It's symbolic. So that's why I want you to read everything and pause it. You'll see what I'm talking about. Now with the Southern Crux, this constellation is always with us. It's with us all year round. Every month. It's always in the Southern Hemisphere. It doesn't move. Or you could say, Jesus carries the cross on his back. Coincidence. And I find it funny too, when I look at that image, I also see the crown of thorns, or some might call it the sun crown, because that's what it was depicted as over the years in all the ancient gods. A sun crown. And coincidentally, Jesus also has a sun crown, or you could call it what is known as the corona, one of the favorite words of today. And you can look at it symbolically when you see they're talking about him wearing his crown of thorns. You see the sun rays coming through the clouds or sticking off the edges of the sun, the corona. That's what they're talking about. That's your crown of thorns. And later on in this story, by the end, I'm hoping you'll understand what this picture is. And you'll see the crown of thorns with the blood. Hopefully by the end you'll understand it. So yeah, he died at age 33. You know, you read it on the minute mark. You know, on the clock, 33-minute mark. You get this story, this event happening, and it all takes place. It's all there. Astronomically, mathematically. It's crazy. I can't believe it. It's just another coincidence of how the earth moves around the sun and the way the shadows cast on the earth. And it's just a great way of telling the story. I mean, for people of the past, I think they did a great job. It's like a calendar for them. I mean, what else would you have if you never had a calendar? How would you tell people to mark the seasons? I mean, from knowing this event, you know it's Christmas time. You would know it's Christmas time. And it's also, you know, time for Capricorn. Now we're moving into Capricorn. The goat, the sheep, the sea goat. You know, the new year. And he's resurrected. And you can put it all behind you now. Put the past behind you, forget about it. Start all over again like a baby sheep. Forget it all and just wipe it away. Heal those wounds. It's a great story. How we can nurture ourselves all over again. And then from there, you know all the other stories. You know where to put zodiacs. You know where to put all the constellations. I mean, just from knowing this one event, this whole story, you can tell this whole story and map out the skies in your head. You know, start all over again. The year begins anew. All your wounds are freshly healed. Spread the word. It's going to be a great year. We're going to start off looking at all the zodiacs, starting fresh. That's why I like to throw this line up there. From once you know all the constellations, you know your map. You can tell a whole bunch of things. What season it is, what month it is. Just from identifying those constellations in this event. The ancients have been doing it for years. I mean, it goes on and on and on. From ancient times to modern times, the story remained the same. I mean, there's clues all over the Bible that indicate astrology. Just like, follow him into the house where he enters. It's talking about the man with the pitcher of water. You're talking about Aquarius. You follow the man with the pitcher of water. You're talking about Aquarius. I mean, how does this make sense? Many mansions in a house. In my father's house are many mansions. How does that make sense? Well, when you look at it as the universe, yeah, it's a big ass house. And then you could look at the many mansions. Or you can even break them down in houses. However you want. Just know that it says, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. The age can be turned into the word time. Annually, he's always with you in our galaxy forever. The cycle continues and goes on and on and on. And I love it because, you start to look again at the 12 signs of the zodiac and you start to relate it to also the 12 apostles. The disciples. Coincidence. Again, you got 12 months of the year and you got 12 zodiacs, 12 disciples. Another coincidence. We're talking about how the sun travels. And also the zodiacs are split up into houses. And a lot of them are also animals. A lot of the zodiacs are animals. And I find it interesting. Where do you find a place? A house known to animals. A house known to animals is known as a barn. Wasn't Jesus born in the barn? Yeah. The 12 houses of astrology. No matter which way you look at it, they all give you a pattern, a story, something to guide you, give you a way of finding your way, where to look, how to find the one. The zodiac changes every 30 degrees on the sundial. Just like in ancient times with Horus, they used to have the 12 helpers. Modern time we have the 12 zodiacs. The Mithras, they had the 12 followers. You go back in the ancient time, the story is always the same. And then eventually we change it to our zodiacs. It just seems like it keeps evolving to the point where it just gets lost. I don't know what happened, but it seems like the story just got lost somewhere. We all know why. But you can keep looking at all of these constellations, and without time, without the sundial and everything, you can just look at the constellations and know where you are. Just from looking and listening to all the stories in the Bible of astrology, I'm sure it paints a big picture. Astrology is heavily involved in the Bible. It's an astronomical story. Starts to unfold when you start to look at all of the things put together. Let's have a recap. You got Canis Minor and Canis Major. You have the Southern Crux and the wounds. All the wounds match up. The way he carries the cross on his back, his sun crown. There's just too many things. And how the crucifixion of the thieves and Jesus shared at the same time during the solstice. All these things keep happening together. It can't be a coincidence anymore. Maybe to you, but after a while for me it's hard to ignore it. I am the light of the world. What are we talking about? Are we talking about the sun and the zodiacs and everything being related to the stars. Somebody once came up to me and said, "Who gave you the right to compare religion to the stars?" And I said, "What? Look around you. Since the ancient times, all of it, and I ain't making this up, this comes from our own historians. They teach you that our ancients, ancestors, worshiped the sun. They had many sun gods. It's unbelievable when you start to look at all the forces of nature and the way we depicted them over the years, thousands of years. And with the sundial and how it came about to give us time. I mean, it's all astrology. It's all based on it. We may have gotten fancier with it over the years, but it's still the same thing. I mean, how we got our 24-hour day. It goes back. It's ancient Egypt, even before that probably. It's been going on for a long time. I don't know how anybody can ignore this. Because when you start to realize how the sundial works, you know, it rotates clockwise in the shadow of the sun, and that's how we get our clocks turning clockwise. But we actually turn it counterclockwise, but the shadow casts the clockwise, and that's how we get our clocks. I mean, every different part of the world is all different based on how the sun rises, you know. And I have to guess that it's because these sundials were created from people that lived in the northern hemisphere, obviously, because they only work in the northern hemisphere when you're looking at the sundial. I mean, I'm sure you can use it in the south, but it's different. It doesn't work the same, the sundial. It actually works a little different, but in the northern hemisphere, it's pretty consistent. And the same thing with your days of the week. They're also celestial objects. I mean, Sunday is the sun. They had the god Apollo for that, you know. You know, they had Monday for the moon. Tuesday was for Mars. Wednesday was for Mercury. And Thursday was for Jupiter. Venus was for Friday. And Saturday, you can guess it, Saturn. I mean, all of these celestial objects and forces of nature were named after planets that we call them today planets, and they named them gods, gave them names. I mean, from the Vikings to the Egyptians, everybody did it. The historians told me so. It was like that. This is the way they understood things back then. And so you can respect it because it's still pretty accurate. I don't know how they did it. I guess a lot of time went by, so that's why we gotta respect this. And you know, for those who live in the land of the deep darkness, a light will shine. What are you talking about? I urge you to pause this stuff. So I even talked to a friend of mine who's a Hindu, and I asked him, "Is it true that you guys are worshipping celestial objects?" And he said, "Yeah." No shame. I couldn't believe it. So I started looking into it. And it's true. Just like the Egyptians, just like the Norsemen, the Hindus still to this day follow this stuff. And it's shocking. To me at least, because they're worshipping celestial objects. Like Monday is Soma for the moon. Mangal is Tuesday for Mars. Come on, ask them. Buddha is Wednesday for Mercury. Yeah, Guru, Thursday, Jupiter. That's right. Shukra, Friday for Venus. Shani, Saturday, Saturn. Yes, and Ravi for Sunday was the sun. And just like the ancients did it, we doing it today. Still to this day, celestial objects are being worshipped, just like the ancients, the Mithras did it. Horus, the Egyptians. I mean, this pattern, still today, the days of the week are named from these planets. I mean, you got Sunday was for the sun, Monday was for the moon, and the month, well, that's based on the moon too. Celestial object, astrology. Every time you get a new moon, you get a new month. It's crazy that we don't talk about this, and I don't even think I learned this in school at all once in my whole life going to school. It's insane. And if you keep watching and paying attention to all the celestial objects, you guess how we get a year. A year happens when the Earth completes one full revolution around the sun. Yeah, that takes 365 days, folks. Actually, 0.26555. It actually is off a little bit. Our calendars, because of those points. But it's all astrology. All of your calendars. Right? Makes sense? And it's based on what the ancients wrote about and how they told stories about their gods, but they just named them different. So who gave me the right to compare religion to the stars? It has been going on forever. I did not start this. And the more I look into it, the more it makes sense. What is symbology? Well, we're going to keep moving. We're going to keep it moving. I like to call these guys the wanderers. The reason why they're the wanderers is they're the ones that move around at night. You know, when you look at the constellations don't move. But the planets, they always move. The constellations are always in the same place, but if you look at that planet the next day, it's not going to be there. It's going to be somewhere else. And so the ancients called them gods. They gave them different names. They say those are gods. They must be gods because they could move in the night sky. And so because they could see them with the naked eye, I guess they told stories about them. And that's how it went. They were pretty clever, if you ask me. And then evolved. And the story has evolved. And that's why we need to talk about it. Because, I mean, I don't think it ever really stopped evolving. We just sort of missed the evolving point, you know. So the next part I want to talk about, it has really nothing to do with this whole concept here, but it's something I want to just point out, you know. I gotta throw this out there because it's something I thought about as well, and I just want to throw it out there. It's probably not the straight facts. However, I'm gonna get my point across, and I want you to see the meaning of this, because I think it's being turned around to a whole nother meaning, and you know, I don't think I like it. It said, what did Jesus mean when he instructed us to turn the other cheek? Well, what did he mean? I think they're just telling us about the characteristics of the sun once again. Turn the other cheek. Well, when you look at the sun is rising every day from the east and it's setting in the west. And so when the sunrise and before sunset in the middle, I mean, you're getting the north and south. You divide the face in half, the face changes. When he crosses that north and south line, he's turning the other cheek. It's going from the east to the west. Sun rises in the east, sets in the west. So he's turning the other cheek. To me, that's what it means. It means to keep going. Do not stop. Don't give up. Never give up. Be like Jesus. Do not turn the other cheek when you don't want to. I mean, they make it sound like you need to put your head down and everything like that. Not even Jesus did that. Did he not knock down everything in the church and tell them to stop gambling and all that? To me, it just means keep on going. And on that note, we're going to keep on going because, again, who is Jesus anyways? Who are we talking about? I mean, there's so many different faces out there. Jesus. Which one do I follow? Well, again, the story for me is an astronomical story, so it's pretty easy for me which one they're talking about. But you got all these people out there trying to just give you all these different descriptions of him. I mean, you got the white Jesus with the blue eyes and the blonde hair, and the brown eyes with the black hair and the brown hair, and the Arab Jesus. You got the white Jesus, you know, the white hair. You got even black Jesus. You got black Jesus too. There's so many different Jesuses coming out. Which Jesus do we follow? Well, how come they can't tell me which one it is? With all the miracles he performed and everything he's done. Well, can there be something that I can go by? Of all these years, people always say, oh, that doesn't matter. So they say he was black because he had the hair like wool. And I said, well, I don't think people that are black have hair like wool. You know what? Or they say he had feet like bronze, so that means he was black. I say no. You're not getting the big picture here. If you were to ask me what he looked like, I would tell you, well, symbolically speaking, he ain't white, he ain't black, he ain't Arab, he ain't Chinese, he look like the sun. That's what he looks like. That's what the description of the Bible has taught me. Taught me that he looks like the sun. Now let me explain you how I came across that. For instance, in the Bible it says his hair, his head and his hair were white like wool. Well, let's look at wool. Wool looks like, you know, clumpy, looks knotty, I guess, yeah. But it looks more like, to me, like the clouds. Remember, you say he had the hair white as snow all the time. You look at the clouds, they look like snow. The hair, because Jesus walked across the earth like the ancients believed. He was walking across the earth. The clouds were his hair, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. I mean, that's self-explanatory. I don't think I have to really mention too much of that. But, you know, we could get into how he got the one eye and all that. And that also comes from ancient religion, ancient ancestors. But eyes like fire, I don't think I need to get into that. That's pretty obvious. This is all in the Bible. This is how they describe him. There's a lot of versions. They describe him different. One says he had a body that resembled yellow jasper. Which human being has a body that represents yellow jasper? Now, I don't want to hear anyone say Asian, because that's just racist. That's not the way it's supposed to. They're not yellow. Just, you see, they also say, another translation said he had a body that shone like a jewel. Well, they didn't really have colors back then either, so I believe the jewels that they're talking about, they used as a description of the best they could come up with how to describe the sun during that seasons, or during the seasons that they see. Just like topaz. Topaz comes in a lot of different colors. So when you say he's like topaz, I mean, I think of all the different looks of how he is in the seasons. I mean, could all these descriptions of Jesus just be talking about the seasons? The way the ancients tracked the sun, this the way they did it. They would tell you look like topaz. Well, they didn't have colors, not like we do today, but they had descriptions and symbology to describe what they saw. So when you look at it through a symbolic language, it's easier to see those colors. I mean, they say his body was like chrysolite. Now, which human being has a body like chrysolite? You know, chrysolite is green. Who's got green skin on this planet? You can't even give me a race for that one. Unless you're talking, I ain't gonna get in there. But yeah, he had a body like chrysolite. What comes to my mind is the earth, the grass. Remember, he's walking across the earth. So, you know, depending on which way you see the sun during that season or during the time you're seeing him, his body could look like that, like chrysolite. There he is, spread out, walking with his hair and his, you know, body, his feet in the ground. Yeah, it makes more sense to me when you start describing him with the forces of nature and astronomically, because a lot of these descriptions that they give of Jesus don't make any sense when you start to look at it with the big picture. Another color they say he had was beryl. His body was like beryl. Now, who on this planet has a body like beryl? Beryl is blue. Now, depending on where you're looking at the sun, yeah, his body can be blue. The sun is setting in the water or rising, it could look blue. Depending on where you are in the season. Well, I mean on the earth, but you got salt water and fresh water. It's just the way the water looks, those colors, and I believe it's based on the time that you, the time of the year, and that's how they describe it. Here's another translation that says he looks like Tarsus. This is a really unique type of stone. I mean, I could see a lot of seasons in that. Give me a color, it's not just one. It's like the sun doesn't have just one color either when you're looking at him during certain seasons. Yeah, maybe you got the same color, you know, like fire, but I mean, when you're looking as the earth, as his body, it always changes. Just like they say here, he had a precious stone. It's funny, when I was looking for that passage, I was looking for the passage, he had a body like a rock. I couldn't find it, but what I was looking for was stone. Yeah, when you're looking at the sun over the mountains, yeah, it could look like his body is a stone. Yeah. Are we talking about the seasons of the year? Is that what we're talking about here? Let's keep it moving. And then they talk about his feet were like brass. Remember, they say the sun used to walk across the earth. So if his hair was the clouds, his body was the earth, then his feet to me, would be the ground, because he's standing on the earth. So his feet were like brass. When I look at it, when he's walking across the earth, it reminds me of the sand. And you look around the world, you can see this color everywhere. Bronze. Why didn't they say dirt? Why didn't they say dirt? Why didn't they say, mud? I don't know. But bronze, I mean, you look at the beaches, you look at the world where Jesus walked. I see the dirt. I see his feet look like bronze. Then there's another passage in there. It talks about how he looks and how he sounds. And it's the water. You can't ignore the water. We always talking about it. It's part of our earth. He said he had a voice of many waters. Just another version. To me, there he is. Like his water. His voice that he makes sounds like water. It's like the old way of tracking the sun, before we had science. It's the way the ancients did it. It was pretty clever, to be honest, for their time. I guess that's the way they did things. I mean, it was pretty easy and symbolic. Everybody knew what they were talking about. There was no confusion. The Mazareth. Think about this. It means the constellations. Why do they have these words in the Bible that talk about astrology if it's not astrology? I don't understand why they have all these words and things in the Bible that make you think about astrology when they tell you that's not what they want you to think about. But everywhere I look, I keep seeing it. It's like the seasons changing. All these stories, I could just keep going and going and going. For instance, they even talk about him 7 stars in his right hands. I mean, you could talk about the Pleiades and being the 7 stars. When the sun sets, in the west, it would be his right side of his face, and the stars would be in his right hand. If you were to imagine him as an imaginary force walking across the earth, he would have the 7 stars in his hands. Or you could even mention the other stars that we don't talk about, the planets. They were known as the 7 planets, the wanderers. And who was the king? That's right. The King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Well, it doesn't really make 100% sense, but 100% sense, but you can see the number 7 all over the place, and it's all astronomical. I like the Pleiades one the best, but based on what the ancients saw with the naked eye, they told a story of what they see. And they could write a story about it. Just like he looked like he was gold. What do we call the sun? Gold. The moon is silver. Yeah. It should come natural to compare religion to celestial objects and forces of nature. Many cultures, from modern to ancient religions, have done this all throughout history, so it should be no surprise to compare Christianity the same way. Looking at everything, from the zodiacs to disciples and the stories in the Bible, and how the ancients used to tell their stories. You know, when they would, for instance, the Egyptians, they talked about, you know, Virgo and Leo together often when the Sphinx is designed. I mean, you got Hercules. I used to think Hercules was this super being and stuff like that growing up as a kid. And I find out he's just a constellation. And we're going to get into him later on in this series. But, you know, he's just another constellation in the story that was told in the ancients, from the ancients. You know, the Japanese have all sorts of stories of thunders, and other cultures have many stories of the sun gods and the forces of nature and how they work. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is what our historians teach us. From the Hindus, all around the world, you can find this pattern of ancient religions and cultures talking about it. Like the Hindus have 33 Gaur gods. That means that there's 330 million gods in the Hindu religion. That's what that word means, Gaur. It's 330 million. Vikings had an own way of telling their story. I mean, they seem to be on the sort of the same page as the Greeks. They both believed in Jupiter. Jupiter was Zeus, and he was also Thor. So, I mean, it's all astrology, which religion you're talking about. Mars, god of war. I mean, really, we're gonna get into that too later on. You know, and you got Neptune. Yeah, deep out in space, deep space. You have the Mayans and the Aztecs, all talking about it. All astrology, with their sun pyramids and moon pyramids. I mean, from the Inuit stories, the native stories, all the stories, it seems to be forces of nature and astrology. It was like a clever way of the ancients telling and marking out the maps on how to watch them annually. How to watch these stories, and how to track the sun and the seasons. After seeing these other gods from other cultures and religions all throughout time, it should be natural to compare Christianity the same way. I don't believe it stopped. The Holy Bible was made up of all sorts of scriptures from around the world. It came together from all the ancient scriptures and texts. So it should be no surprise to find astrology in there, because that was the original language too, was symbology. They told these stories over and over again. We're going to get into it deeper, but I'm just trying to scratch the surface here to give you the idea and the concept. Like, for instance, I go on for hours. We're going to talk about the miracles of Jesus and how, you know, the seasons change all the time. Like, for instance, this one miracle they talk about in raising the dead. To me, all they're talking about is spring. All the dead raises. Everything was dead, and it comes back to life before your eyes. It's a miracle. How can the dead grass come to life? How can the dead trees start to bloom? How can all the flowers that were dead come back? He's raising the dead. It's a great story. It's a great way of tracking the sun. Another one they talk about is how he heals the sick. Well, everybody knows that you need the sunshine. Everybody knows that the sun is the best sunshine. It's the best medicine you can get. Yeah. It cures all sorts of things. For instance, a baby that's born with jaundice, all you gotta do to cure it is put them out in the sun. Nowadays we put them in front of artificial light, but the ancient days they put them in the sun. Yes, he healed the sick. He heals many things. He can help you with so many things, with just getting exposed to a little bit of sunlight every day. So yes, the statement is true. The sun heals. He heals the sick. And we can get more detail into that, but I'm just scratching the surface here. So, another one they talk about is how Jesus walked on water. Well, let me explain that symbolically. See, when you see the sun and the sun rays glistening off the water, the ancients would just simply say that he was walking on water, because they saw the sunlight glistening off the water. To them, that was him walking on water. But it got blown out of proportion somehow, I believe, with our modern day language, and the symbology behind it got lost. But I believe personally that the symbolic meaning behind it is just the sun reflecting off the water, and he's walking on water, and you can see it like. And that's what he meant when they talk about these scriptures. I mean, you can explain it through forces of nature. Again, coincidentally, with the hair, the eyes, the body. Yeah, even blue could be the sky. Also, we have 3 days. What the 3 days is talking about here is, I want to point this out, how Jesus calms the storm. You see, during the solstices and equinoxes, you'll notice how the weather gets all wacky. And it usually happens when the sun stops during the solstice, or when it's crossing over during the equinox. All the weather gets wacky. And even in between the seasons, in between each month, you can see it. The weather gets wacky. And I'm telling you, it usually, if you pay attention to the pattern, it lasts about 3 days. Hey, just look, watch it, and you'll see it. During the solstice, we'll get winter storms, crazy ice storms. When that happens, that event, you know, you might say you're gonna get a white Christmas because of it. And you know, during the equinox, same thing. You know, these 3 days come around, these days when we're crossing over. When we're crossing over from the south to the north hemisphere, we got all sorts of wacky storms, all sorts of crazy weather. But once it straightens out, you know, from winter to, you know, spring, the equinox passes, usually around that time of that month, we see some really messed up weather, and it stops all of a sudden. Everything gets real nice. It's like the sun is out controlling the weather. So don't be discouraged, you know, he's coming, he's gonna save you. He's gonna come out. Right? The sun stands still. In the summertime too, it's the other solstice. Again, we get all sorts of wacky weather. It goes on for a few days, and you know, we experience this craziness, like these crazy storms. But then all of a sudden, after the storm is over, usually in the night they come around when the sun is down. You know, we get real bad weather in the night for some reason. But when the sun comes out, it's all nice again. You know, calms the storm. You can see it happening over and over again, just like when we go into September, the other equinox, and we start to see it all happening again. And all the weather gets wacky. But then, you know, everything starts to calm down again. And the sun comes out. after the storm, the sun rises. You always see the sun after the storm. And it's all calm again. So they say it calms the storm, or the stilling of the storm, whatever you want to call it. You know, it's funny, they say, what kind of man is this, that even the winds and sea obey him? Well, he isn't a man at all. He's the sun, and the sun always shines after the storm. And that's why I say that story explains how he calms the storm. And so if you look at the big picture, how the sun is always with us, and how these stories are constantly going on and on and on. If you have these stories and you know what they are and how to tell them, what season it is, it's like you could tell the future. It's like you know what to expect. You know, with all these stories, you can understand the calendar without even the calendar. I mean, for instance, the next miracle here I want to talk about is how Jesus turns a fish into bread and he feeds the poor. This story is beyond scientific explanation, but if you explain it symbolically, it's real easy to understand. You gotta look at Pisces, the fish, the two fish. And you notice the date of the Pisces is from February to March, but that's because that's based on the old calendar. You see, during the winter months, winter wheat is growing. And when it is ready to reap the crops, to reap the rewards, it's Pisces. It's actually springtime. It's where the sun is actually transiting through the constellation Pisces. So the old zodiac calendar is incorrect because it hasn't been updated. It constantly changes. The correct dates are actually from March 11th to April 18th is when the real sun is translating through Pisces. That's the correct calendar dates. You're going to have to pause this to see it, folks, because you got to keep on going. The elliptic plane is when it's an imaginary line that the sun strikes its path through, and the sun transits, it goes through the constellation. And when this is actually happening in Pisces, it's actually in March and April when the crops are ready to be reaped. It's the equinox, it's spring, it's pretty accurate. But because our calendars are off, they haven't changed to match up to the dates. But if you go by the story, he took two fish and fed the poor. I mean, it's pretty accurate because the sun keeps rising and transiting through that constellation. So in my opinion, that scripture is actually pretty accurate compared to modern day zodiac calendar, which is actually incorrect because the sun transits through Pisces in March and April, which is the more up-to-date, accurate calendar. And so now we're going to go talking about how Jesus turns water into wine. It's another one of mine that I love to talk about, because everybody says, oh, how could they do that? Well, it always gets me how they use wine in the story and not like tequila or something, you know. Like, why wine, right? Well, I'll explain it to you. I mean, the ancients weren't as dumb as you think. I mean, they knew the phases of matter. They knew solid, liquid, and gas, and H2O, and how it changes the states of matter, how it evaporates and turns into clouds, and then rains, and then freezes, and yeah, they knew all about this cycle and the states of matter from solid, liquid, and gas. But they didn't have a word for red. You know, instead of saying red, they said wine. You know, you went from white to wine, water to wine, white to red, water to wine is a better way of saying it. So when the sun is setting or rising, he changes water to wine. And that's the story. It's a miracle how he does that. When you look at it symbolically, it makes a lot of sense. How the water changes color. And the color never had colors back then. They had other ways of describing it in biblical times. And wine was a more appropriate word for it, just like all of the jewels and the way they describe his body. It always seems to be symbolic. So there you have it. You got the miracles described astronomically through forces of nature. I mean, it's I can go on forever, but I'm just trying to scratch the surface here. How this map of mine works. We're gonna get into it really deep, but we're trying to get past this part. It's a really big part of the story about how the seasons are changing. I mean, here's another miracle that in order to understand it, you gotta look back. You gotta go way back. And it's very complicated, but when you start to see the big picture, it makes more sense when you start to look at it a little symbolically, and how we change the story of the scriptures over and over again to match our needs of the current time. What time did they really talk about this before is what gets me. You have to go back. You have to talk about this character named Orion, which still today, this constellation is named Orion. Now over the years, different cultures have different names, different meanings. You know, all the way back to ancient Egyptian times, we got different names for this constellation. But we're going to focus more on modern day and the latest name, which is Orion. Orion, from the Greek times, from the Greeks, they always talked about the greatest hunter and the stories about him. There's so many stories about him, many different versions, and I encourage you to go look them up. But I'm just going to stick to the facts. I want to stick to the facts about Orion and why it's important to Jesus. See, Orion always got himself into trouble. He ended up getting himself blinded by somebody. Someone always blinded him. You know, you got could have been Gia, it could have been Mother Earth, it could have been the king. Someone blinded him, but he always ended up going to the sun and asking the sun to heal his blindness. I mean, there's a story of him with Artemis. And Apollo was his sister. She didn't like the relationship. There's so many different stories about it. And he sent out to kill him. And then you have Apollo's story is involved in this. And you also have another character in there, Helios. But Apollo is the last one. And Apollo, even in this story, when he gets himself in trouble, before he gets in trouble with Apollo, he goes to Apollo. He also has another story about Orion, how he could walk on water, because his father was Poseidon, who was Neptune. You know, that deep blue planet out in this deep space. Yeah, that's his father. You know, you guys you see at night. And then you also have another character named Gaia, Mother Earth. That's her, folks. Mother Earth. She's also in the story of Orion. She doesn't like Orion very much because he's always killing all the animals, you know. Anyhow, the story remains generally the same in most versions of the story. He's always the great hunter. You know, he's usually got his dogs. He got his dogs. You know, Canis Minor and Canis Major are actually his dogs in the story, his hunter dogs. And they love to hunt rabbits or hares, lupus, the constellation lupus. Yeah, they got a lot of things stay the same, but the story has always changed. And I think the story always changed because of the way the sun moved. That was their way of changing their story. So that's just how I put that together. However, the main thing is to focus on the things about the story that are the same with all the versions. Like some of them he has the Scorpio comes to kill him. It's either sent from Gaia or it could be sent from Apollo, which we're going to talk about later too. I love that part of the story, but there's so many alternate endings to the story, but it always stays the same. Scorpius always kills Orion. He doesn't win this battle. You know, he's always running from him in the heavens. They say Zeus put them all up there because to remember them, but we know these constellations were around way before the Greeks, so obviously it's not true. However, the story is there, and you have to take from it what you can, and symbolically. And it tells a story about how he's always being chased by Scorpio, which again, you can mark the time of the year. When you see Scorpio, you see Orion setting, you see Scorpio rising, you know. But did you notice anything? The stories have almost the same story with Jesus. There's parts of it that are the same. And the part that I'm pointing out is how he heals the blind. Well, we're talking about Orion gets healed from Apollo or Helios. Helios is a sun, and so is Apollo. So again, you have a story of the sun healing the blind, who is Orion in the story of the Greeks. But they changed the names. Orion was always searching for the sun to cure his blindness. And the sun has similar stories, just like Jesus. I mean, after a while, I don't know, it's hard to me to see it, but when you start to understand the way the Orion travels in the sky, then you start to see the story being painted even better when you look at the Greek story. Like Helios would cure his blindness. That was before Apollo. Helios was the sun god. But the story changed, but Orion stayed the same. Apollo took over Helios, but it was still Orion. Orion, this constellation, was still in the picture. Why did they change the name from Helios to Apollo? I don't know. I don't know a lot of things, to be honest. I'm just putting this stuff out there. Maybe you're gonna make it better. You're gonna make it better than I could. You're gonna change it. You know, once this information's out there, it's gonna grow. But the facts are the sun would cure Orion's blindness. Now you need to understand more about Orion. Orion is a constellation that runs along the equator. He's actually in the middle of Earth. You know, when we're flying around out there in the galaxy, you can see him pretty much anywhere in the southern hemisphere all year round. And so when we see him, it's the winter time, and that's when the snow comes. So I'll put it out there and say, you know, he's a equator constellation, which, you know, is visible throughout the whole world. and you basically see him through the winter months. And so it's cold, and you got the winter time, you got the snow. And now anybody knows when you're in a blizzard, it's almost next to impossible to see. So you're blind in the snow. And when the Orion comes out in the fall equinox and then goes to the spring equinox, well, he's going into, the summertime. So we're no longer going to experience the blindness that Orion experienced. You can see the seasons changing all throughout this story. Just like the sun gods cure the blind and heal in ancient religions, we can compare Jesus the same way from previous sun gods. Stories of how the sun travels. This one highlights the season change from winter to spring. Curing the blind. The snow, the fog, if you will, represents blindness. I'm putting it out there. That's what they're talking about. Is the snow is blinding us, blinding Orion. And when the sun comes out, it cures his blindness. You got more sunshine, less sunshine. We go from that 12 hours of sunlight, more 12 hours of sunlight instead of less hours of sunlight. Everything thaws out. Apollo. Let's talk about Apollo for a minute. All the things they said about him. He was a sun god. He's also known for healing. Right? Isn't that funny? Again, another sun god known as curing the blind and also known for healing. These things stay the same. A lot of things change when you're looking at Apollo, but a lot of things stay the same. Like, he's the god of light. He's the sun. And then they change it again back to Helios. And again, Helios was the same thing. He was the god of the sun. He had the gift of sight. Now, if we didn't have the sun and the light, we wouldn't even be able to see, period, right? You need the light to see. That's how the brain works with our eyeballs and all that. We need light to work. So, being the god of sight, yeah, it makes sense. Being the sun god, well, that's what our historians tell us. That's the way it was. And that's how they teach us, a lot of things that could go on for them, but these are the things that stay the same. They always had the gift of sight, and they were always the sun gods. And this is who Orion ran to be able to see again. How a coincidence. This story of the sun god healing and healing the blind. We could see it again in the Greek mythology. The way Orion travels from one season, from autumn to spring, and cures Orion of his blindness. Or you could say Jesus heals a blind man. It's dark, and you see light. So, this story about Orion is really interesting. He also talks about how he had the gift to walk on water. He had the power to walk on water because of his father Poseidon. Well, just like Jesus walks on water, his reflection glistens off the water. Well, Orion did the same thing. He does the same thing. When you look at him on a nice clear night, he can walk on water too. And I think it's pretty crazy how we can make these comparisons coincidentally once again. Yeah, he walks on water just like Jesus. Why do they describe it like that? I don't know. It's just a story, I guess, the way they brought up this, the way of walking on water. And there's also another character that reflects off the water or sits on the water. That's, the lady of the night. Says, come, I will show you the punishment of the prostitute, the great prostitute, who sits on many waters. Yeah, she sits on many waters. What are they talking about? Well, because the moon traditionally symbolizes the feminine energy, based on their 28-day menstrual cycle. The moon has a lunar cycle of 29 days, pretty close to the woman's menstrual period when the way they change their cycle. So the moon has been related to the female entity because of that, and usually the moon is related to the female species. You can find the sun being female if you go back far enough, but generally the moon is a female figure. And it's because of the phases of the moon have, I guess, evolved somehow because of the way the woman's cycle is, it changes. Also every new month you get a new moon, I guess, it just represents the way the woman's menstrual period is. And also you talk about the gray whore of Babylon. Well, why is she the gray whore? It's because she's always being passed around every month to a new zodiac. New month, new moon, new zodiac. Just like the harlot. Great harlot would get passed around to all the new constellations each day of the week. They call it sinister. They say just from the sight of her would cause abominations, She used to be called the gray harlot. Somehow they changed it into the gray whore. Harlot was just mean pass it on, but then they changed it to the whore. I guess somehow in the Bible that made more sense to people. I don't know why they did that, but
prostitute.
I think it made the story more confusing talking about it. But you talk about her colors, she was always dressed, in scarlet and purple, red. She's always considered to be full of abominations because, at night all these bad things happen, right? She also rode the beast with 7 heads. Yeah, that's, where these numbers come from. The planets, right? She's riding them every day of the week, sleeping with them, sitting down on them every night. She reflects off the water, so she sits on many waters. And her color is always purple and scarlet. Yeah, and they say the cup that she carried around was full of abominations. And just horrible things they would always say about the moon, the great harlot. Why, I don't know. It's just, I guess, easy to understand. You look at the night and how it is. Sometimes she was portrayed as being naked or white or dressed in purple. Or look at the moon. What other thing in the world does that? It's like, the bloody moon, right? Always depicted in the greatest colors, right? Red with the 7-headed beast. Yeah, you can start spelling it out for me, how this is all related. Dressed in the white. Yes, your moon. And the blood moon represents the scarlet that she changes into sometimes. Yeah. And looking at the way it changes through each month, through each day of the week. That's just the way she's riding the beast. They call her a whore for it. It says that one day she'll make war with the land. Who's the land? Who's she making war with them every night by coming out. But you know who's gonna win. Sun. The story of the sun versus moon, the day versus night, good versus evil. It's been going on since ancient times. If you go back far enough, you can find the sun being female figures, like I was telling you earlier. And the moon was actually a male figure. And then eventually they changed the sun to a man figure. And the woman took over the moon god. But it depends on what culture it was. It didn't happen overnight. But there was a lot of changing of gods over the years. But it's all astrology. It's all sun, just like this Lamasu. It's a funny symbol you find all over ancient Iraq. And it just meant the zodiacs. That symbol was a protection symbol, and it was the zodiacs. And you go back and you look at all the goddesses and the depictions of the moon. It was always related to a female figure. Over the years it started to change. And you could see the evidence all over the place. There's so many goddesses. And a lot of them represent the moon goddess. And when you start to realize that the sun is the man and the moon is the female, it's pretty intriguing, I think. From ancient times, the list goes on. You can look it up and see there's so many different goddesses that are related to the moon. But what's even more interesting is the relationship. The relationship that the moon and the sun have. See, historically speaking, there's always been these stories of the sun and the moon and the relationship, husband and wife. I'm going to refer to the Chinese, the Asian. They have this Asian culture of, usually it's found within the Asian culture. They have the autumn moon festival. It's in the Chinese calendar. You might find it in Japan. That's why I say it's not just the Chinese, it's all throughout the Asian community. And these two are in love and they want to get together, and the only time they can get together is when they see each other in the clear skies, and then they can be together again. The sun and the moon. It's a great story. They always talk about them being married, and it's a beautiful story. And it's not just the Asians, it's also in South America you find this story. With Gia, and he had a husband named Su, who's the sun, and the sun was married to the moon, Gia. And this they always have this sort of relationship going on between these two. The sun and the moon are in love. From Japan To all corners of the world, you have this story, it seems like. You can find it somewhere out there, you know. Gold and silver, Mary. And these are like really the two strongest elements we have on this planet. Gold and silver. It's funny how we talk about the sun and moon like that. But they're connected for us, you know. Even in ancient times they have stories of the sun and moon getting together, and together they had 4 seasons, you know. 4 suns, 4 seasons, 4 suns together. Funny, right? Same with Sol. This is Sol and Manning from the Viking era. And this is the man who is the moon in this situation. And the sun was actually the female. But together they were in a relationship, husband and wife, always trying to avoid those wolves, you know, the darkness of the night. Trying to chase them. They're always trying to avoid them so they can stay together forever. It was a connection, you know, love connection. They were in love. It's a great story. I mean, even in Africa, there's some stories of the moon goddess there, who Gledi, I might say these names wrong, Gledi, the moon goddess. And every time there's an eclipse, they would say it was the shadow of her husband. So the sun, again, is in a relationship with the moon. Throughout history, you can see this story over and over again. It's a beautiful story, actually. It's a great way of looking at the celestial objects. I mean, if you were stuck in the wilderness, I guess it would be an easy way of telling where you were. You just have to look at which way the sun rises. You know what direction you're going. Right? The sun, the moon, the way the moon sets, right? Same thing. You had all these stories. But however, just got to remember the fact that this pattern has been happening all throughout history. It should be of no surprise to compare Christianity the same way. So I'm going to keep on moving and bring up Mary Magdalene. She has to be one of the most important people in the Bible. She's one of the apostles of Jesus. You know, so if we're saying that Jesus is the Son, because we're talking symbolically, he's the Son, then symbolically, Mary Magdalene is the moon. She's always depicted as being dressed the same way, because the story has changed. She's no longer the whore of Babylon. She's now the Scarlet Woman. She still dresses in red. She's still depicted like that. You gotta admit, probably most of your kids were conceived that night. So her being a fertility god, it ain't so far off, huh? She also carries a little vial with her with all the earth scents, all the earth's beautiful smells. How'd she do that? How'd she collect all the earth smells? All the beautiful ointments. So she was cured of her demons from Jesus. So she's no longer the whore of Babylon. She take on a new meaning. She's no longer that prostitute. She's no longer that girl that everybody hates. You know, it's crazy how they made her to be this horrible woman. But was she really Jesus' wife? Did the church not want to talk about it? Historically, looking back at all the other gods and stories and myths and legends, since the Bible is made up of all the stories from around the world, it shouldn't be too hard to conceive this concept. She is the moon, and Jesus was the sun. I mean, I could go on for days about how there's this little relationship. People have made many movies about it. There's so many things talking about this. But I want you to focus on how they depict her. It's always in red, like the scarlet harlot. They always depict her as a sinful woman, just like the, you know where this story came from. How they depict her as a prostitute, because she always, in the nighttime, sleeping in another house every night. Yeah, every month she got a new constellation. She with a new one. She getting passed on. Just like a harlot. What? New month, new moon. So she got this reputation over the years. And they just kept it going, I guess. I mean, seeing how she changes over the years and the months. That's just the way the Bible made her. All the stories are from around the world. Just like this one here, where she goes to his feet and washes his feet with her hair. And those fancy smells. While when the sun is rising, the moon is setting. And so they say she bowed at his feet and washed it with her nutments, or her tears, or her hair. Well, what does that mean? Well, the hair, just like Jesus walked on water, the moon would sit on the water, the reflection. Well, some of these guys can share stuff, right? Just like the sun, the wool is the clouds. The clouds are his hair. Well, just like the sun has the clouds as his hair, the moon as well. We can say the same thing. The clouds are the moon's head. And so when the sun is rising and the moon is setting, or vice versa, you can say she's at his feet. She's washing his feet with her hair, or her tears. Her tears, or her smells of the earth. It's a love story. It's always been a love story. Just not told like that. Just like when, he gets crucified, he's got, the sun crown on. See the blood now? You see it? I asked you earlier if you're going to see this blood. He's wearing his crown with his blood on his head. The crown of thorns, the sun crown. And Mary is there. She witnessed everything. They say that she took her hair and washed away the blood from his feet when he was crucified to the cross. Washed away the blood from his feet with her hair. Well, if you say her hair, it's just like the clouds. Well, Jesus makes them red, and the blood, and her hair, yeah. When he's setting, when she goes down, and he's rising, the same thing. Turns those clouds red. And so she was first to see his crucifixion, and she was there at his resurrection, Mary. So, just like on the winter solstice, when he's crucified between the two thieves, guess who's there too? His moon. She washes all of it. And when the sun starts to move back north in the hemisphere, when the sun starts to go north, who's there to see it first? That's right, Mary, the moon. And he's healed because it's the new season now. He's born again. And she witnesses it first. And you know what time of year it is. And from there, he goes and spreads the word and shows all his disciples he's back. And so to me, this story is another astronomical story of the Scarlet Harlot, you know, being the moon. And there's also another Mary there. Virgin Mary. I want to talk about her too, and what character she is in the Constellations. So to understand that, we're going to have to mention how it came about this. For 100%, I believe that this is the truth. You gotta know Venus. You gotta understand Venus. But we're gonna do that in the next chapter.